Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rahahakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations as always to the elect. I wanted to get into the topic, of food, offered to idols, or foods and meats sacrificed to idols, and bring understanding, to this controversy. And hopefully you brothers and sisters are edified, as there has been controversy, back and forth, with particular camps, as over the years, questions have arose, of can believers in Yahweh Bashem Yahushai eat the meat, eat the food that is lawful, that will be associated with particular holy days on the left-hand side, and, we deal with it according to the scriptures, and we deal with it in balance, and that's what we're going to deal with today. And we're also going to show you how foods sacrificed to idols differed, from, the first century, to where we are now, in this century, and how Apostle Paul had to deal with these situations that arose in the church, because where they were, in the region they were, which was dominated by Greco-Roman influence, it had many, many satanic, sacrifices, practices, the drinking of blood, and many other things that were associated with, meat offerings to different gods. So we're going to go into this and hopefully bring, balance and understanding to this situation. And hopefully you leave this lesson, being edified and comforted, because that's the purpose of us doing this. And we'll deal with, Paul's letters. And first I want to deal with, this condemnation to being stoned by Alazar Bunloya of the Sakari camp, using these scriptures: Numbers, the 25th chapter, Exodus, the 34th chapter, Deuteronomy, the 13th chapter, Revelation, the 2nd chapter. We're going to deal with these first head on and show you that his usage of these scriptures to condemn us to death, meanwhile rubbing elbows with blatant idol worshipers and unbelievers, is hypocritical. That's the first thing we're going to deal with, because he used this scripture here in Numbers, as our forefathers were in the wilderness. We know that the stubbornness and hard-heartedness of Israel, was even spoken about by Apostle Paul. It's evident, many of our forefathers, were put to death. There was a generation whom the Lord allowed to wander 40 years and die off because of their unbelief and their hard-heartedness. Now, when we get here to Numbers, the 25th chapter, it says, and Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. See, they started to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto their sacrifices, of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. Israel joined himself to Baal Peor, and the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel. So they're associating this practice, because when you get into the understanding of what these heathen were actually doing as they sacrifice these various different, not only meat offerings and drink offerings to these gods, they would strangle particular animals and, drink the blood. And Israel was joined unto that. And when you deal with Baal Peor, it means God of the opening. As a matter of fact, let's look it up here. I believe that's what it means. Lord of the opening. Baal Payawar. Lord of the gap, or Lord of the opening. The deity worshipped at Peor, with probable licentious rites. See, evil rites. So the God of the opening, which was associated with sexual immorality and various different things. Now, what we are addressing, all right, overall is the eating of the meat that was associated with these sacrifices. As when you get to the time of Paul in the book of Corinthians, all right, a lot of the meat that was available, all right, in the shambles was available, all right, after these particular cultures and pagan, believers did their sacrifices. They would sell the rest of the meat in the shambles, all right, in the markets. And we're going to deal with it, all right. But right here, this is not dealing with merely the meat, okay. Israel joined themselves unto these gods and bowed to these gods. We are in no shape, form, or fashion telling you to bow to a particular god. All right. What's happening in the book of Corinthians dealing with Apostle Paul was dealing with meat that was sold in the markets, just as today you deal with meats that are sold in the markets that have been offered to idols. All right. And I wanted to say this also. There can always be an argument. All right. You have individuals who rub elbows with blatant unbelievers, where we are commanded, all right, not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. All right. You have some believers who say they can go to the club, and, shine their light in the club. Now, when you deal with the club, right, as Al-Azhar, they like to go to the club, and you got particular believers, in their liberty, they go to the club. I'm not condemning you to death if you go to the club. I'm not saying you wicked, but me, myself, I prefer not to go. But when you deal with this practice of the club, all right, let's get it real quick. This is the book of Romans 13:13. Let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting and drunken, and not as chambering and wantoners, not in strife and envying. Now, when you deal with this word rioting, all right, again, we can always go tit for tat, all right, in particulars, all right. But the bottom line is we all need mercy. And the food that we have available to us is definitely offered to idols, all right, and it's all defiled. The best thing we can do is pray to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, all right, with what we have, all right, and eat as lawful as we can, because everything is defiled again. So the word here is komos. It says revel, carousal, a nocturnal and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows who after supper parade through the streets with torches and music in honor of Bacchus, all right, or some other deity, and sing and play before houses of male and female friends, hence use generally of feast and drinking parties that are practiced till late night, all right, and indulge in revelry. All right. Now, when you deal with the club, all right, that is basically in dedication to Bacchus, the god of wine. All right. Now, you may not be drinking. All right. But the whole practice and ritual of going to the club and going to these parades it's all ultimately it's all attached to idols. Remember, we are in the revival of the Greco-Roman Empire. So one could say you going to a club, all right, which it is good advice to stay out of them. All right. But again, we're under grace. We have our liberties. All right. As we are in this truth. So I can't condemn you to being wicked or to death. All right. If you go here, but one can make an argument and say, well, basically, look, these feasts and these riotous, parades and parties that, people do today, that goes back to practices that were going on in the ancient, Greco-Roman culture. All right. And we could argue back and forth. We could say, you wear Nikes. Don't you know Nikes? All right. Go back to the Greco, the Greek god of victory. All right. Or goddess of victory. We could say, well, if you have on Nikes, don't you know you're upholding another god? All right. We can get very, very technical. All right. So this particular law or this particular instance that the Sakari brought out in Numbers 25, where Israel did eat and bow down to their gods and join themselves to Baal Peor, all right, is not what we're saying is okay to do. All right. The point of contention comes with the meat, as the meat that was sold in these particular cultures as we get to the Roman Empire, all right, was associated all right, with particular sacrifices that were done to other gods. All right. And what is an example of that today? Halal. Halal meat. All right. What is halal meat? All right. Halal meat is the only type of meat that observant Muslims are permitted to eat. It must be slaughtered in a specific way according to Islamic law and cannot be from pork, reptiles, forbidden cuts. All right. As these are, sons of Abraham. So there's particular laws that they do practice. Right. They don't eat pork. All right. Now, when you deal with halal meat, halal means praised. All right. Consecrated, set apart, holy. All right. And it adheres to Islamic law. Now, you have particular believers who go to the halal mart. All right. These, Arab stores or these Elamite stores even. OK, to get their meats because it's a better cut. They take care of their animals in a better way. All right. Don't you know that someone could tell you that technically you're eating food sacrificed to idols because they sacrifice it in a particular way? All right. There's particular videos on YouTube you can look up of how, they sacrifice, their lambs, their goats, their cows or whatever. All right. And it's praised. All right. Halal means praised. All right. To another God. OK. So, again, don't we say call halal all praise to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai? All right. So, again, and I found a website, all right, where, all right, what is an example of food sacrificed to idols eaten in the West? Any food labeled halal. Now, how many of you believers have eaten halal meat? How many of you believers have, went to an Elamite restaurant and you see their gods, an Ammonite restaurant and you see their gods, a so-called Chinese restaurant, which Ammon is Japanese, all right, Vietnamese food. When you go in there, don't you see their gods in there? Well, one could say to you, well, don't you know that that's sacrifice to another god and that you're going off? So what Al-Azhar is saying that basically we and the Apostle Paul should be stoned, as we're saying the particular meats that are associated with this that are lawful. I mean, just eat it. All right. But if it condemns your spirit, as we'll get into, Apostle Paul also dealt with that aspect of it. You shouldn't. All right. The bottom line is peace amongst the churches. So any food labeled halal, which means it has been sacrificed to Allah, all right, of Islam, to make halal meat. For example, the animal is to face towards Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and the throat is slit after the Bismillah. All right, there you go. There, the Allahu Akbar. All right, which is a broken form of Hebrew. All right, which means Allah is greater. See, it is declared over it. Yahweh Shai, it says Jesus is among those whom Islam's Allah is being declared greater. So you'll have some believers say not to eat it. All right. But then they'll go to McDonald's. They'll go to Burger King. And like Al-Azhar does, they'll even go to Taco Bell, which look at the Taco Bell logo and you can clearly see a 666 hidden in it. And that's not even real meat. All right. So, again, this can be a very, very petty back and forth. All right. Which would lead to, nothing fruitful. All right. But I wanted to deal with it. As again, they brought out Numbers, the 25th chapter, and they also brought out Exodus, the 34th chapter, before we get into the lesson. All right. And the 12th verse, take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. Okay. So that was the order, to destroy their altars, break their images, cut down their groves. All right. For thou shalt worship no other God. See, this is dealing with the worshiping of other gods. We worship Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. When we eat our food, we pray over it in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, right? For Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous power. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their God. See, this is what this is dealing with, going a-whoring after other gods. and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. See? And when you deal with how these sacrifices were taking place, it was some very, very wicked, all right, practices tied to these things. Okay? So again, they're using this scripture, all right, which is dealing with bowing and a whoring after other gods, okay, and eating of their sacrifices, partaking of the sacrifice, okay, partaking of the ritual, partaking of the things tied to it, which this is what made the Lord mad. All right. And then they went here to Deuteronomy, the 13th chapter, to say basically this is why we should be stoned to death. All right. Meanwhile, they rub elbows with blatant idol worshipers like Saneter. All right. And the rest of these guys, people who deny Yahweh Shai. OK, people who are blatant idol worshipers, and they call them brothers. You see, now, according to the law, those are the people who should be stoned to death because they are trying to call you to worship another God. Deuteronomy 13 and 1. If there arise a prophet among you, a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and serve them. You see? Now, they're making the argument, all right, because the question came up, all right, if, you know, my family cooks on so-called Thanksgiving and I eat the food, am I going off? And some brothers will say, all right, yes. Some brothers will say, well, I'm just eating the meat. I'm not partaking of any of the crap they are part of. I'm just there. I'm eating. I leave. All right. But some people are bothered by that. Some people are tie that, you know, day, all right, to Satanism. And basically the meat and everything is offered to, you know, the god of Mars and all of this. And they don't eat it, which both have the right in their liberty in Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. This is what we're saying. Okay, whether you eat it or whether you don't, do it all in the name of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. All right. It's just food. We're just dealing with the food. We're not dealing with the sacrifices and the practices. And again, the way that, you know, Jake, you know, they get together and they may have these, you know, happy Thanksgiving, which I don't go. I don't have family like that. But not everybody is in the position I'm in. Some people live with their family. Some people go visit their family just to say what's up. All right. And don't feel condemned. But then you'll have certain believers that'll say, you know what, that's wicked. I'm not going. And they feel condemned, so they don't go. And Apostle Paul dealt with these extremes and how to handle it, because, again, things came up. All right. And we'll show you. All right. As they are saying, the Apostle Paul broke the order of Acts, the 15th chapter, why Paul had to deal with this. All right. Because these are questions that were arising as, all right, he left Corinth, because I would believe he was there 2 years. All right. And after he left, there came what? Dogs and people amongst the church. All right. With arguments and, you know, seducing them to get back into, you know, idol worship practices and various different things. See, so we're saying, let us go after other gods and serve them, as this law says here in Deuteronomy, the 13th chapter. OK, so as you keep reading, you should not hearken to that prophet who has these dreams and tells you to follow after another god. And then verse 5 says, and that prophet and dreamer of dreams shall be put to death. So imagine if Eleazar was in position, all right, and had the power of the ancient Sanhedrin, or the ancient wicked scribes and Pharisees and chief priests. He would have the authority to have us put to death. All right. And this is a misuse of these laws and what we're saying. You see, we're not telling you to follow after another God. When have you ever heard us say this? All right. The question that came up in the book of Corinthians, all right, is dealing, all right, with food that was offered to idols, that was sold in the markets. And we're going to get some background, all right, to give you an understanding of what Paul was facing, what this church was facing in Corinth, because Corinth was lit. It was the center of many idols and wicked practices on the left-hand side. And these Gentiles who became followers of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai through the teaching of the disciples and the apostles, what they did, all right, was left off from those idols. And a lot of those idols still had power over them. All right. And associated with, the meat that was sold to these markets that were tied, all right, to sacrificial practices on the left hand side, which again, everything you eat here today, all right, is not sacrificing in line with how the meat, all right, of the law, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai should be, all right, sacrificed. All right. Again, when you read the law on clean and unclean meats, anything that is cooked, all right, any stove or any pot that is used to cook unclean things should be destroyed according to the law. That's in that chapter in Leviticus, the 11th chapter. We don't have, all right, that comfort here. You go to a restaurant, all right, you think they're going to, switch, you don't think they're going to throw away a stove because they cooked a pork on it? No. Even if they wash it off before they cook your food, the food according to the law should be, the stove according to the law should be destroyed. So there's no way to win, as the meat that we have goes through many, many wicked practices. The animals are raised wicked, all right, and terrible. By the time we get it, we're just going to the market and we just have to pray to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, all right, over what we're buying, all right, hoping that it's, in hopes that we don't, destroy ourselves. See, in another scripture I want to get real quick here in Revelation, the 20th chapter, or 2:20, all right, as the Most High through Yahweh Shai, through the angel, was speaking to the church at Thyatira, all right, Thyatira, all right. This is a church that was raised up of followers of Yahweh Shai, all right. What they were doing here, it says, notwithstanding, Revelation 2:20, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel. Now, is it the literal Jezebel, all right, the heathen wife of Ahab, King Ahab? No. All right, it's a spirit, all right, which the Apostle Paul had to address, all right, particular things that were going on in these churches. That's why he said, I suffer not a woman to teach, or usurp authority over the man, because in these churches, Queen of Heaven worship was a big thing as they turned from those idols. All right. But it still plagued their mind, and they still allow particular things that went against, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So in a lot of Paul's letters, he had to address it. OK, let the woman learn in silence, not to usurp authority over men. These were things, all right, that he had to deal with, as these churches, all right, were raised in places where woman worship was a big thing. So Yahweh Shai says this, all right, Revelation 2:20, notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, these wicked women who were raising up among the church, being put in positions of authority, talking shit to the prophets, and men were bound to that. You see, and you have that spirit in a lot of these churches today. A lot of these camps, they allow that spirit. See, they allow their women to come onto the comment boards, cursing, men out and talking shit about, the apostles and elders. They allow that. See, but here, all right, there was more going on than just a bold and rebellious woman. All right, which calleth herself a prophetess, all right, to teach and seduce my servants to commit fornication and eat things sacrificed to idols. You see? Now, let's read this in NLT. Okay? Because, again, with those wicked practices, all right, there were drink and meat offerings tied to it. Just like on the right-hand side, did not we have drink and meat offerings, all right, to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai? Well, these wicked practices on the left-hand side did the same thing to their gods, all right? And it was a heavy practice amongst the Greco-Roman regions, man. All right, this was rampant, you see? But I have this complaint against you. You are permitting that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet, to lead my servants astray. She teaches them to commit sexual sin and to eat food offered to idols. So this was going on even amongst the churches of Yahweh Shai. All right, they were being, all right, swayed to commit fornication and get back into those wicked practices that they were a part of. All right, because when you go to 1 Corinthians real quick, 6 and 9, all right, there's a lot of history we got to tackle for you to understand what was going on here. 1 Corinthians 6 and 9, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of the Most High? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, all right, nor abusers of themselves with mankind. And to be an idolater, you bow to idol and you associate with the practices, okay, of that idol, which everything here today has idols tainted in it. Everything you practice, everything, the education, the music, the food, all of these food chains, they're all rooted in idolatrous practice. So really, all right, we should just be sitting in a corner somewhere, all right, starving ourselves to death. All right. But again, all right, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, under this grace period, all right, we use discernment and we pray to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai in everything that we do. All right, wherever we are, we're in the spirit, you see, and hopes to get the hell up out of this place as we have learned how left, all right, and wicked of a situation we're in. We need help. We need deliverance. All right. If the law was applied to us, right, we would be all destroyed. All of us. None of us would make it if the first covenant standard was applied to us. So, nor idolaters, nor effeminate, all right, which goes into, you know, the sodomite. All right. You had particular males, all right, that were used by, you know, Greco-Roman officials that were used as boy toys. See, this was a heavy, and this is a heavy spirit here today. Back then, it was more out in the open. See, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of the most High. As such were some of you. See, as such were some of you. Some of the believers who came to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai through the preaching of the disciples, the apostles, turned from these practices. As crazy as that sounds, right? But ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, ye are justified in the name of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai and by the spirit of our power, Yahweh. See? So again, when you get here to Revelation 20, some of these particular churches fell back into those idolatrous practices. You see? And again, they started to get into the rituals, as we showed you just an example of it here in Numbers, the 25th chapter. Okay? They would eat and bow down to their gods. Okay? All you have to do is look it up. See if I can look it up real quick. All right. Let's get Numbers, because my internet is tripping, so I'm going to just go here. Numbers 25 and 2. All right. And did eat of the things sacrificed to idols, so became guilty of idolatry. And by doing so, when they had eaten and drinking, were merry, were led to other acts of idolatry, and bowed to their gods, which was a plain an open act of idolatry, whereby they testified their faith and their divinity and their reverence for them. See, this is what Jake was doing back then. And this is what we are being accused of. Meanwhile, you're hanging with people that literally do that, right, with Egyptian and gods of no value. And they're your brother and they're cool. All right. It says, they solicited the daughters of Moab, hearkened to them to comply with them. And this is what King Solomon did. And they used to take the image of Peor out of their bosom and said, worship this, signifying that on the condition they would gratify them. All right. And thus whoredom led. And that's what happened. You had temple harlots. All right. All kind of wickedness was going on. You see, and this is what kind of practices were going on, in these areas, all right, in Corinth, all right, Rome, and these various different, Greco-Roman territories. Now, when let's get Acts the 15th chapter, where, these Gentiles who were freshly coming in. This is before the book of Corinthians, Galatians, Romans, and all of that was written. You see, these particular Gentiles, all right, who were brought in, were being forced to, meet the standard of the first covenant, even, be forced to be circumcised, right? So, they had a council, and this was the order, all right, by James here, all right, who was a pillar in the church, all right? It says, Acts 15:19, wherefore it is my sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned unto the Most High. Many of the Gentiles who were scattered among the heathen turned back to the Most High through the preaching of the word. See, they had been raised as complete Greeks and Romans, right? But through the preaching of the word, they were compelled to repent, all right? And people think, using grace and, the standard of, grace and liberty, leads to one, doing whatever the hell they want to do. No, all right? When you understand Yahweh sacrifice, you should be compelled, all right, to keep the law to the best of your ability. You see? But you should also understand your circumstance here in Babylon the Great and appreciate and lean on the blood in these particular situations where it's like, what the hell am I going to do? Okay? It says, but we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood. All right. Now let's get to the history of this. All right. Because of course, these new coming, Gentiles, it will be good to order them to stay away from these things. All right. It would be very good. All right. But the question came up in the book of, all right, Corinthians dealt with eating the meat, not the practices. All right. Not the sacrifices. All right. Not going in the temple and partaking in these rituals and drinking the blood. Because, yes, that's what they did. Why do you think James is saying this? Because these were the practices. So what I'm going to do is go to this. All right. This is BibleTopicExpo.worldpress.com. All right. Let's see here. So we're going to read some of this article and we're going to jump to the book of Corinthians. All right. We're going to jump to the book of Romans and deal with why Paul was writing these letters and the questions that were coming unto him and what he was hearing about. These churches were starting to return to various wicked practices. All right. You even had an instance where a dude slept with his father's wife. All right. Like severe wickedness was going on. And Paul had to write letters and address these things, as he couldn't just show up. He couldn't just do a FaceTime. He had to write letters. And what we're reading when we read Corinthians, Romans, Galatians is the letters addressing what was happening and the issues that were arising. Okay? So when you deal, let's see here. When you deal with, let's see here. Let's just get to the point. The society and religious beliefs of Nero's Roman Empire, 54 to 68 AD, a beastly regime, were quite different from ours. Times were much worse in the first century, all right, world than the 21st century America. All right, very different. All right, way more barbaric. All right, but Esau's getting ready to get back in that spirit. Okay. Let's see here. And we'll get that. Yeah, it says, let's see here. Salakia. It says, as background, let's first reference scriptures about idolatrous practices which were extant in the ancient world. All right. And again, we just showed you a few examples which we're being accused of. We're being accused of enticing our people to, partake in, wicked sacrifices, bow to other gods, which that's the last thing we're doing, right? You listen to our videos, you never got the notion that you can do that, right? And if you do, all right, then hey, say something. If that's what you think when you hear us teach the scriptures, all right. I just did a video. I reloaded a video going into the down the rabbit hole of idol worship and how everything, all right, that we partake in. You go to Starbucks, that's associated with the Semiramis, the Queen of Heaven. Okay, some brothers and sisters, who believe, go there and drink that. Are they wicked? Can they be condemned to death? Are they, all right, bowing to another god? These are the tit for tats that we can get into in this, in these situations, and we're going to show you how Paul addressed it. All right, Lord willing, we'll try to get through this. Okay. Despite Yahweh's commands, because it was him in the wilderness, right? Israel ate and bowed down to the god Baal in Numbers 25, 1 through 3. We read that one. David wrote about idolaters in Psalm 16 and 4. What sorrows await those who turn to other gods and be multiplied. All right. Will multiplied. What sorrows await those who run after another god will be multiplied. The sorrows will be multiplied. All right. Which, I will not pour out their drink offerings of blood, nor take their names on my lips. All right. So you have IUIC calling on Jesus Christ, yet because they don't rebuke Sakari is okay with them and big them up, although they're blatantly leading our people to call on a Greco-Roman god that's tied to deities on the left-hand side named Jesus Christ. And I did a video why it's imperative for our people to drop that name. Yet they don't get stoned. They don't get any rebuke. Why? Because they're not getting on the Sakari. So that's okay to call on the name of Jesus Christ and to teach hundreds of thousands of Israelites, even millions possibly who watch them, all right, to call on Jesus Christ, and that's okay. You see? See, there it says, drink offerings to pagan gods were often blood mixed with wine, and Jake was a part of those things. See? You have to understand why James is saying this. He ain't just talking about, the stay away from bloody steaks, which you should do that, right? But he's talking about, all right, the actual practices that were associated, all right, with the foods offered to idols. Okay, he says stay away from pollutions of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood. Okay, what we're dealing with in 1 Corinthians, the 8th chapter, and what we're talking about is the literal meat that would be sold in the markets. All right, and we'll show you. Let's go back. Okay. Okay, drink offerings to pagan gods were often blood mixed with wine. Ezekiel 33 and 25. Thus saith the Lord, you eat with the blood and you lift your eyes to idols. Israelites were eating strangled meat with the blood dedicated to idols. See? The heathen ate the blood of sacrifices or set beside that blood in a vessel, all right, to communicate with evil spirits. And that's happening today. Spirit cooking, all kind of left-hand practices. And Jake is into that. Jay-Z, right? And where you're just eating the meat that you buy from the market, or that a non-believer, you go to their house and you eat it. You're not partaking in all of this. This is what was going on in the ancient Greco-Roman Empire. This is why James had to say that. Stay away from that shit. See, the heart of their sacrificed animals was often extracted. All right. Hosea 4:12-14. Israelites were sacrificing to idols at altars. All right. With temple prostitutes. Again, there was a difference between just a streetwalker or a woman, all right, who was, selling her body for sex, and a temple harlot. All right. Two different things. Temple harlots were associated with bowing to the god, all right, and partaking in a sexual union, all right, in dedication to that god. See, you would have to bow to that idol first. See, but again, a lot of people don't study. So what they end up doing is seeing particular talking points in the Bible and they just blurt things out based on what you read in the English, and they don't do any study. Acts 14:11 through 15, the priest of Zeus, whose temple was outside the city, brought oxen into the gates to offer sacrifice. Okay, you can get it. Somebody can put it on the comment board. All right. The priest of Zeus wanted to honor Barnabas and Paul with animal sacrifice as if they were gods. Oxen are clean animals, but not all pagan animal sacrifices were clean. All right. Like we know the Greeks use swine in their sacrifices, and they forced the Israelites to offer swine in their sacrifices. Okay. And you have to understand this background before you read, so that you can, when you read these things, now you understand what is going on, what Paul is having to address. Paul ain't just addressing, all right, eating a plate of food from Auntie Emma's, right? Where you pick around what's lawful and leave. No. He ain't addressing that. See, it was a different ball game in the ancient world. In the 160 BC's Antiochus Epiphanes offered swine flesh and polluted the Jerusalem temple. We just said that. Okay. From Acts 15, the Jerusalem council from all prohibitions were sent out, all right, in a decree to the church at large. See the topics of for prohibition. Acts 15, 28 to 29. It seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us that you abstain from things sacrificed to idols. All right. All right. From blood and from things strangled, dying of itself. All right. And from sexual immorality. All right. These four things were customarily practiced in the Roman Empire and impacted the early church, especially Gentile believers. So this is the type of practices the Gentile see. You know, some of us, we were just in Greek fraternities. We did wickedness. All right. We, were in gangs and we did some evil things before we came into this truth. All right. Brothers, running trains on chicks. All right. Whoremongering, doing all kind of wickedness. All right. But back then in this era of the ancient Roman Empire, all right, it was more headstrong. It was more it was deeper than what you see now. Okay, you join a Greek fraternity, all right, you get a brand, that's to another god. Back then, they told you, this is for another god. You doing it, they don't really tell you that when you go into those Greek fraternities. You just being, you don't really, you just getting the brand and, the drinking and like, nigga, I'm gonna get some hoes. I'm in a fraternity. You don't really understand the extent of what you're joining. See? But back then, you did these things, the brands and the sacrifices and the all of these things, all right, as a blatant, all right, worshiping of another god. See, you still think, I believe in Jesus, but you're doing all of these things. You don't have no idea what you're doing. You see? But once you come into the truth, when you go into the history and you start to link things, you're like, oh, damn, this is what I was a part of. Oh, then you learn, and it impacts you in a way where and the laws of the Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is the way. I need to get my shit together. Man, I was going off. Then you learn about Yahweh Shai's blood and how it covers you and what he did for us, and you're compelled to live a holy life to the best of your ability. Okay? It was said anciently, all right, the worship of pagan deities could be engaged in almost every and in or on almost every street corner. See? Just like we see, liquor stores and, Walmart and churches, which those are temples to wicked things. Back in the ancient world, the blatant worship of pagan deities would be engaged in almost every street corner. All right. 1 Thessalonians 1:9, Paul wrote, Christians at Thessalonica had turned from idols to serve the true God. 1 Corinthians 12:2. All right. When the followers of Yahushua at Corinth were pagans, they were led astray to dumb idols. We always get that. Let's get it real quick. All right. Hopefully you're starting to understand what we're going into, because there's more. There's more. It may have to be two parts, but let's get 1 Corinthians 12 and 2, as we always get. 1 Corinthians 12 and 2, ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. See? It was different than our background. It was a lot going on back then. All right. It says, Acts 15 and 29 prohibited Christians from sacrificing to idols at pagan temples. Okay. You all should study these things, especially if you're going to be a teacher. All right. Yet years later, some in the churches, Revelation 2 and 14, Revelation 2 and 20, still eat things sacrificed unto idols and commit immorality. All right. And in that sense, it was sexual immorality, violating Acts 15 prohibition. So what they're teaching is that Paul violated it. All right. By teaching about eating the meat that was sold in the shambles. And we'll show you. The worship of pagan gods and goddesses was a way of life in the ancient world. A multitude of animals were often sacrificed. All right. Hecatomb was a Greek term for offering oxen. Now, I'm not going to read all of this. All right. Here's a hypothetical question. Would the Holy Spirit have approved or disallowed of Christians eating a roast beef sandwich at the Aphrodite dinner and wine shop adjacent to her temple? All right. Paul explained where, when questionable food should and shouldn't be considered defiled by idols. All right. He wrote 1 Corinthians around 55 AD. All right. Ancient Corinth. All right. Southwest of 50 miles southwest of Athens, Greece, had many idol temples to Aphrodite. All right. Apollo, Demeter, Poseidon, all right, and so forth. You can look those guys up if you want to, but, they're just idols on the left-hand side, all right, which all of those idols are back here today in Babylon the Great. And in some form of fashion, they guide the culture which you live in. See? In verses of 1 Corinthians 8, Paul addressed eating things sacrificed to idol. Pagan idols represented pagan gods. All right. And it says here concerning the eating of the things sacrificed to idols. All right. Now, is he talking about partaking of the ritual? No. This is what you have to understand. All right. And we can keep reading that, but we're going to jump to it ourselves. Okay. Because there's a balance to it. But when you go here, this is what we have to understand about that time. Throughout the Roman Empire, animals were sacrificed to gods at feast and public occasions. Part of each offering was used in a ceremonial meal, just like the sons of Aaron. They would go into the temple and change out the showbread every Sabbath, and they would offer sacrifices, and they would eat that bread that they had just changed out, and they would eat the rest of the sacrifices, man. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's see if we can find that real quick. Give me a second. My internet is starting to trip. Let's see. I have it somewhere. I think I had it saved in some of my notes. Okay, yep, Leviticus 6. Let's get that. Leviticus 6 and 26. That's one of them. Leviticus 6 and 26. And there's other scriptures that go into it. All right. The priest that offer it for sin shall eat it. All right. In the holy place shall it be eaten, in the court of the tabernacle in the congregation. See if we can get this in another version. Goodness gracious, the internet. The internet is tripping. Give me a second here. We'll get through it. All right, there's more that meets the eye when you go into these types of things, and you should know as teachers, like we ain't expecting everybody to know on this deep of a level, but as a teacher, you have to know these things, especially if you feel to be making accusations that brothers should be stoned and put to death. All right, because you've done many things worthy of being stoned and put to death, and you want mercy. All right, but you're condemning, all right, brothers for just eating meat and food, but they believe in Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. All right. But as we'll show you, you under this grace, whether you eat it or whether you don't, we're not supposed to condemn one another over eat. As the scriptures say, the kingdom ain't meat and drink. It's just meat. If it's lawful, you eat it. Live to see the next day. But you'll have certain believers that are like, nigga, you die, you eat that shit. All right. That's why you got to be mindful of what you do. All right, who are you in front of? What you say? Who you're in front of, man? Now, the Leviticus 6:26, the priests who offer the sacrifice as a sin offering must eat this portion in a sacred place within the courtyard of the tabernacle. See, we even had rituals where we ate the meats in certain offerings, man. See. Yep. Numbers 18:10. In the most holy place thou shalt eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. All right. You can go more into it. But that was the practice that we had, but we did it on the right-hand side to our God. All right. But you have to understand these particular pagans, these heathen had their rituals to their gods. So here, throughout the Roman Empire, animals were sacrificed to gods at feasts and public occasions. Part of each offering was used in a ceremonial meal or went to the donor. All right, because it was people who brought these things to be offered as sacrifices. Like you would bring your offering to the priest or your gift or whatever. In our culture, they had it in theirs. Part of each offering was used in a ceremonial meal. All right, they would have the parts that were most holy and they had to be offered up. The rest went to the donor. The remainder was sold in the meat markets, sold in public meat markets. All right, the dilemma that came about is, should followers of Yahushua eat meat that had, all right, been offered to idols? Jews, all right, the circumcision had prohibitions. Pagan temples also served as restaurants and butcher shops. Wait a minute. Now, here in Babylon, as we said, if you go to a East Indian restaurant, Elamite, they have Krishna. They have their god sitting, and you'll see Buddha in certain cultures just sitting there. All right, or the guy with all of the arms. You'll see all of these guys sitting there, pictures, actual idols carved out, sitting there looking at you. All right. Again, butcher shops that we get our food from, right? Like I like to go to the Elamite mart, all right, to get some of my meats, all right, and especially herbs and spices. But don't you know those can be called pagan shrines and temples because they worship other gods and they're serious about their other gods. They make bread every day. I go and get the chapati bread. Now, are you going to tell me because I go there and get the bread and certain meats that I worship those idols tied to it? No, I don't. Neither do you. I know you just want the meat because they handle it in a better way. All right. Again, these cultures that are surrounded here in Babylon the Great who have setups here, they have their marks. You go to the African mark, which some of them are Jakes, some of them are actually Hamites. They have better stuff. All right. And when you go there, what do they have? They have their meats. All right. But again, the way that they do a lot of these things is associated with their idols, their God. They're not praying to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. All right. They don't eat meat from anywhere else but where they get it from. See, those marts are for their people. All right. But see, your black ass or my black ass, we go in there and say, well, I'm here. I want some. Right. Now, am I going off? Am I worshiping idols? Am I bowing to idols? No, I am just buying the food that is sold in the public markets. And this is what Paul was dealing with, and we'll show you. Okay. In 1 Corinthians 10, Paul returned to the issue, beloved, flee from idolatry. Now, let me read this real quick. Okay. This is an excerpt of 1 Corinthians. It says, the apostle, the apostle himself was nearly 2 years at Corinth, where he preached with great success. All right. And was the instrument of converting many people who by him were formed into a church state. Many churches were being set up, consisting of both those of the circumcision and those of the uncircumcision, which will say Jews and Gentiles, Jews and Greeks. All right. As is clear from many passages in his epistle, in whom he left in good order and in great peace and harmony. But quickly after his departure, false teachers got in among them, and bad principles were embedded by many of them, and evil practices prevailed among them, and they fell into factions and parties, which occasioned the apostles to write these epistles to them, all right, as well as their writing to him concerning things they desired to have judgment and opinion on. All right. It is thought to be written about the year, all right, of, say, Christ 55, in the first year of Nero, though some place it in the year 59. All right. But again, the apostle first rebukes them for their schisms and divisions, suggests that their regard for the wisdom of men and the philosophy of the Gentiles brought, all right, the simplicity of the gospel into contempt. So all of these arguments and wisdom, which we see all of these things happening today here amongst the churches, right? You see guys getting into all of this wisdom on the left-hand side and bringing it to the church and, confusing and, challenging the Apostle Paul's authority and getting into these arguments, finding these new arguments and thinking, wow, my apostles didn't teach me this, and then putting it out there, all right, without any regard for the weak people. And people are now walking around, all right, talking about, I'm keeping the laws, but fuck Paul. Paul don't have no authority over me. I can do it, all that shit. We see it all happening now. You see what I'm saying? We see it all happening now. We see all of these things happening, man. See? But as it says here, pagan temples also served as restaurants and butcher shops. So when you go to eat your Elamite food, your Vietnamese food, all right, which, it's best to make your own, learn how to, make, take their recipes and make your own. But you may find a particular restaurant you might happen to like. Don't you know there's actually a Indian temple here in Dallas where they have a vegan buffet, and it's very good. Right, but when the buffet is closed, they're burning incense to gods and all kind of different stuff up in there. Now, this was early in the truth. I haven't been in a long time, but I didn't realize what was going on there. It was just, I heard about a good, some vegan food, Indian food. I like Indian food, Elamite food, right? So you go in there, and one day I went in there, all right, and as the buffet was closing, I looked to the right, and they were actually like burning incense and screaming to these guys. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't realize, oh my God, this is a literal temple. I was just like, oh, it's food here. See? But it was on an even deeper level back then. Okay? Some people like to eat the pho, the Vietnamese pho, all right? The noodles with the the soup and but when you go there, look around. They have their calendars, they have their gods. That can be called a temple, and somebody like you can really be called wicked for eating that, according to what these men are teaching. So when you read 1 Corinthians 10, let's get an example. All right. of what's being said here. I'll call that brother back. Give me 1 second. Hold up. Shalom.
Hey, Shalom, what's wrong with that? Busy?
I'm doing a lesson. Everything straight?
Yeah, I have to talk to you. Get through that. Talk to you about this today. So,
Okay.
yeah, just call me when you're done.
I'm gonna call you right back. Shalom. Shout out to my main man Bon Sapad. All right. Stuff we deal with in our churches, all kind of stuff, man. So, hey, anyway, let's get 1 Corinthians 10 real quick. I want to show you something. All right. Lessons from Israel adultery. All right. Now, what he's dealing with here, all right, is what happened to our people, okay, in the wilderness as they, all right, swayed away from righteousness, man. Okay. He's talking about our people, our fathers. All right. 1 Corinthians 10:1. I do not want you to forget, dear brothers and sisters, about our ancestors in the wilderness. Who were the ancestors in the wilderness? Hebrew Israelites who were exodused out of Egypt. All of them were guided by a cloud that moved ahead of them. All right. And walked through the sea on dry ground. All right. All right. And that cloud was Yahweh Shai. Paul understood that. All right. Yet God was not pleased with most of them, and their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. These things happen as a warning to us so that we would not crave evil things as they did. Okay. Or worshiping idols as some of them did. See, we read about, in Numbers, the 25th chapter. All right. We can even go to Exodus, the 32nd chapter, I believe. As the scriptures say, this people celebrated with feasting and drinking and indulged in pagan revelry. See, pagan revelry. See, this is what the Gentiles were told to stay away from. All right. And what we're going to show you is dealing with as far as the meat that was sold in the market. All right. Which, again, the meat we eat here today can be offered to an idol. It says we must not engage in sexual immorality as some of them did, causing 23,000 of them to die in one day. And you can find that instance in the book, I believe it's Exodus, the 32nd chapter. This is when the Levites became Levites. But, you can go to Numbers 25:1. Okay. But I believe it's Exodus, the 32nd chapter. All right. Which sexual sin is a big thing, man, in this Greco-Roman Empire. All right. But engage in sexual immorality, as some of them did, causing 23,000 to die in one day. I believe, let me see real quick. Let's see. 23,000 Israelites died in one day. Okay, I guess that is Numbers 25. We read about that. All right, but there was a point in Exodus 32 where Jake was worshiping the golden calf. All right, they were naked. That was tied to the wicked practices as well. Okay. Nor should we put Yahweh Shai to the test as some of them did, all right, and died from snake bites because they were rebellious. See? But what he's talking about here, he's speaking against the actual practices of sexual immorality and the drinking of the blood. And Paul is not with that. He's not telling them that this is cool. All right? I just want to give you all of that before we tap into what his judgment on foods offered to idols. Okay? These things happen to them as examples to us. They are written down to warn us, all right, who live at the end of age. All right. And again, we showed you, all right, in Exodus, in Numbers 25, that Jake bowed to Baal Peor and went and partook in those sacrifices. All right. Ate the meats and laid with those women and were joined unto Baal Peor. Paul is speaking against that. We are speaking against that. All right. I just want that to be made clear. All right. As we go down, because a lot of these churches fell back into these practices. As we hear, Paul is telling you not to do those things. All right? Let's see here. Verse 14. So, my dear friends, flee from the worship of idols. See? He's telling them to flee the worship of idols. Okay? Point blank period. And again, you have to understand Paul's writings, why he's writing these things, so you can teach the proper doctrine. All right? Let's just keep reading. Think about the people of Israel. Were they united by eating the sacrifice at the altar? All right. Weren't they united by eating the sacrifices at the altar too? Speaking of the priest. All right. What I am trying to say, I am saying that food offered to idols has some significance. All right. Or that idols are real gods. No, not at all. I am saying these sacrifices are offered to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to participate with demons. You cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and from the table and the cup of demons. You cannot eat at the Lord's table, all right, and at the table of demons too. What? Do we dare rouse up the Lord's jealousy? All right. Do you think we are stronger than he is? Because Jake started to go back into those temples and partake in the sacrifices, and they started to fall off and merge it to the church. Okay? That's what they were doing. You say, am I allowed to do anything? But not everything is good for you to do. You say, am I allowed to do anything? But everything is not beneficial. All right. Don't be concerned with your own good, but for the good of others. So you may eat the meat that is sold in the marketplace without raising questions. All right. Now the word is going to say shambles. All right. Which is Makelion. When you read the King James, it says shambles. All right. Makelon, a place where meat and other foods are sold, the meat market. All right. So listen to what Paul is saying. Let's go back. The butcher stall. All right. Which again, we just showed you in a lot of these meat markets, most of them. Okay. The meat was offered to an idol. Okay. Goodness gracious. Let me go back here. Before it was sold in the shambles. Just like yours. I don't care where you go. I go to Whole Foods. How was it sacrificed? How was it butchered? Was it butchered in the name of Yahweh Bashim Yahshua? So we can make the... No, it wasn't. So we can make the argument that it's offered to an idol. And you damn sure, you on camera eating Taco Bell, all right, Kentucky Fried Chicken, which now is just KFC. What the hell you think those things are offered to? Alazar, you on camera eating Taco Bell, Church's Chicken. Come on, bro. That's a horrible example, but we could say that. Don't you know the people who own these corporations, how they grow the meat? It ain't even real meat. The genetically altered everything. So here it says, so you may eat what is sold in the marketplace without raising questions of conscience. All right. So when you go to these different stores, just buy what's lawful and pray over it. For the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. All right. Technically, the Lord made cows. The Lord made chicken. The Lord made, salmon. But the way that everything is raised here, you can be, defiled in your mind about eating anything. And how could you move forward like that? All right. As Paul said in Romans, the 14th chapter, Romans 14:2, for instance, one person believes that it's all right to eat all meats, not just anything, not a skunk, a possum, a worm. I put sugar on it. I made my own gummy worm. No, that ain't what it's talking about, man. Again, this is the church. So they know and understand what's lawful to eat. All right. But again, the practices tied to the food that they had readily available to them put some people's conscience in a very uncomfortable state to where they just didn't eat it. But another believer with a sensitive conscience will only eat vegetables. All right. Now, we have that example with Daniel. Daniel didn't eat of the king's meat because he understood, all right, what was tied to it. So he just ate posts, the vegetables, smoothies, of the day, right? So again, you may have a believer who says I'm a vegetarian. All right. Now he'll eat of the Passover, but on certain, for the most part, I don't eat meat. All right. Can we say he's wicked? No. I mean, hey, at the end of the day, all right, hey, you just don't eat meat. Well, you're gonna have to eat, on the Passover you'll have to eat it. All right. But if you don't want to eat meat, you don't eat meat. But back then they weren't eating the meat because they knew the source of it. Those who feel free to eat anything must not look down on those who don't. And those who don't eat certain foods must not condemn those who do, for God has accepted them. And again, this is going into, of course, what is lawful, but certain believers did not eat things, all right, that were offered to idols. But certain believers was like, shit, it's sold in the market. I don't give a damn. I don't believe in those guys. And they ate it. Who are you to condemn someone else's servant? Their own master will judge whether they stand or fall. And with the Lord's help, they will stand and receive his approval. All right? And you can keep going. All right? So let's stop condemning each other. Decide instead to live in such a way that you will not cause another believer to stumble or fall. All right? And that's one of the conclusions. I know and I'm convinced on the authority of the Lord, Yahweh Shai, that no food in itself is wrong to eat, of course, if it's lawful, right? But if someone believes it is wrong, then for that person it is wrong. So for you brothers at the Sakari, right, Alazar, if you in your body, you say don't eat a plate of food, my boo bring me a plate from her auntie house and I tell her to just put lawful things and make sure there's no swine and then she bring it to you on those particular days. I mean, you may have, somebody that say don't eat that. Why? Because for that person's conscience, all right, it's wrong to eat. And if another believer is distressed by what you eat, you are not acting in love if you eat it. So basically don't eat it in front of them or don't broadcast it, right? But again, these things are asked on the comment board, so we have to answer these questions outright. Just like Paul writing this letter. Don't let your eating ruin someone for who Yahweh Shai has died. Then you will not be criticized for doing something you believe is good. All right? Because every man has to be fully persuaded in his own mind. For the kingdom of God is not a matter of what we eat or drink, but living in a life of goodness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. All right? All right? It is better not to eat meat or drink or wine, all right, because even wine back then, there was wine associated with wicked practices. So, again, we could go on and on and on about the things that you eat and drink and all right, and what it was tied to back then, which was causing divisions in the church. So Paul had to deal with this. All right? This is what Paul said. All right, because it might cause another believer to stumble. You may believe there's nothing wrong with what you are doing, but keep it between yourself and the Most High. Again, that's great advice. As long as you ain't eating no unlawful food and partaking and talk about bless Jesus Christ and, and crying and praying with, no. But again, another believer may be like, I'm not going, fuck that. All right, and you have every right. Again, we're under liberty, but we ain't supposed to condemn each other and get into back and forths about killing one another or stoning one another over meat and drink, which we know we all believe in Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, right? Blessed are those who don't feel guilty for doing something they have decided which is right. So anything that condemns your spirit, don't do it. And this is what I tell any brother who asks for advice. If it's condemning your spirit, don't do it. All right? But if you have doubts about whether you should or should not eat something, you are sinning if you go ahead and do it. All right. For you are not following your convictions. If you do anything you believe is not right, you are sinning. See? All right. And again, the argument, all right, of the day was eating the food that was sold in the markets, in the public markets. Okay? That's what it's talking about. All right? Some Jews renounce all meat sold at markets. You see that? You had these contentions. That's what Romans 14 is dealing with. Now, people will read that, Christians, and think it's talking about pork, hippopotamus hips, all right, snake, rabbit, turtle. No, man, it's talking about the food that was sold in the markets that was associated with these idols before it was sold in the market. And Paul gave a very balanced answer. But you can hinder somebody who is weak regarding what, because they understand what it's tied to. All right. So let's go to 1 Corinthians 8, and we should finish it off here, but let's finish this out. 1 Corinthians 10 and 27. If someone who isn't a believer asks you home for dinner, accept the invitation if you want. You don't have to. You don't have to go. All right. And of course, you particular people who are close to you who to even invite you somewhere, they already know I don't eat this, I don't eat that. Like my family's in Cali, but they know. All right, because it don't have to be so-called Thanksgiving for them to cook. Certain families always cook. All right. So you go. All right. They know you don't eat this and that. And they'll tell you, yeah, Jay, I made you the greens without the pork in is over there, because they know. Right. So again, that's just a background. But again, everybody's situation is different in its truth. All right. And we have to be mindful of that. If someone who isn't a believer asks you home for dinner, and accept the invitation if you want to, eat whatever is offered to you without raising questions for conscience. Of course, all right, understanding what is lawful and not. All right. You're not just fit to, they put a piece of catfish in front of you. Oh, okay. No. You pray over it. You eat it. All right. You talk your little talk. You leave. Okay. That's usually how that goes. But suppose someone tells you this meat was offered to an idol. Okay. Back then, that meant more than just standing over the food praying to Jesus. No, that meant that it came from one of those temples that was associated with the idols of the day, where they would drink blood and then they would sell it, the butcher shops and all of that. Don't eat it out of the consideration for the conscience of the one who told you, because they are now going to associate you eating it with you, all right, worshiping that God. See? It might not be a matter of conscience for you, but it is for the other person. Why should my freedom be limited by what someone else thinks? See? But these are things to take in consideration. If I thank God for the food and enjoy it, why should I be condemned for eating it? So these are situations that believers would find themselves in. This is why Paul is having to address this. And a lot of people don't understand. Paul is writing letters and addressing matters that are personal to people in the church. Okay? If I thank God for the food and enjoy it, why am I condemned for eating it? It's lawful. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to condemn us for eating lawful food, all right, on a day that people hold holy in this world. We don't hold it holy. I think it's just Thursday. I'm off. So whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. All right. And again, if a brother doesn't want to, or if a sister doesn't want to, you have that liberty as well. But for a brother or sister who does, you're not supposed to condemn them to death and cause this friction. Meanwhile, you're rubbing elbows with blatant idol worshipers and their brothers and sisters. No. All right. Don't give offense to Jews or Gentiles or the church of the Most High. All right. There's There's certain things you have to work out your own salvation in this walk. Everything doesn't need to be broadcasted. It's my liberty. I can do it, But again, we have to address these things. All right. And someone is watching this offended right now. All right. I don't care. I'm giving you the truth of what the Bible says, because they're presenting Paul as one who's saying it's okay to sacrifice to idols and do all of the wickedness, and he broke James's order. No. The question came up of the meat. I too try to please everyone in everything I do. I don't do what is just best for me. I do what is best for others. All right. So that many may be saved. All right. So you have to read the room. You have to be mindful. Okay. Before we finish, we're going to read this in 1 Corinthians, the 8th chapter, and we'll finish off. All right. Let's read this. Paul is helping the Corinthians navigate a similar sort of tension in this passage. Someone has asked Paul a question. Is it okay for followers of Yahushua to eat meat that has been previously sacrificed to a pagan idol? All right. In Corinth at the time, most meat available had been used as part of temple sacrifices. So Corinthian Christians were wondering if it is okay to eat that meat, whether they purchased in the market or were dining with non-Christian friends. Why you got non-Christian friends? All right. But then you with Sonetter. You see the hypocrisy of these guys, man? And they play on the emotions of people, all right, and make you seem as though you're an idol worshiper. And that's what was being charged to Apostle Paul. Like they were saying, like your stance is okay in sin. Man. It says, for some new followers of Yahushua, Christians, eating meat that had been sacrificed to an idol would have been difficult. Why? Because they had just come out of a lifestyle where that meat was tied to a god they held in reverence. All right. And Paul says it could ruin their weak conscience. All right. Which is a sin against Yahushua. All right. So you have to be mindful. Okay. So let's go here. 1 Corinthians 8:1. And I remember I brought this out before, and Alazar responded. He said, "You drinking blood, sacrament? What are you talking about? What?" They don't get it. They don't understand what was going on. Why James says, "Stay away from things strangled and from blood." They don't get it. They're reading this, and they're just thinking, "Oh wow, Thanksgiving, Christmas." All right. Which, hey, if you stay away, hey, I would rather not be around my family, all right, on certain days, all right. But again, everybody's situation is different, all right. Some people go to work and they have potlucks on these days, all right. And maybe the brother may be low on money, all right, or the sister, and they go back there and they see something lawful, all right, hey, they may make them a plate. Does that make them a partaker of a sacrifice and bound to a god? No, they're just eating food, man. But again, if you don't want to eat it, you have that right. The goal is peace amongst the believers in Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and we got to get the hell up out of here. 1 Corinthians 8:1. Now, as touching things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge, but knowledge puffeth up and charity edifieth. Because you had Jake getting deep, and just going too far, all right, with their liberty and, messing with the conscience of weaker believers, man. Okay. And we never want to be guilty of that again, but we do have to address these things. Okay. If any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing as he ought to know. But if any man love the Most High, the same is known of him. As concerning, therefore, eating of those things which have been offered to idols. This is what Paul is. Let's look up the word eating. It's not saying partaking of the sacrifice, homie. So stop lying and stop misusing the law. Cause eating is, see how we had to go through that background, and there's so much more in that article that we could have went into, but it's just eating. Okay, which eating can be symbolic in the scriptures of taking in wisdom, but in this case, it's talking about literally eating. all right, of those things which have been offered or offered to idols. Let's read this in the NLT. So what about eating meat that has been offered to idols, not partaking of the rituals, man? This is what Paul is addressing. We just read a chapter where he condemned being a part of the rituals, drinking the blood and doing all of that stuff that Israel did in the wilderness, which led to the Most High smoking a lot of them. See? As concerning the things, eating those things which have been offered in sacrifice to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world and that there is none other God but one. All right? So we know that. We know that the god of Mars, the Aphrodite, the queen of heaven, all of these things are nothing. There's only one God and one mediator between the chosen people and his God, and that's Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. For though there are that are called gods, for though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, there's many gods in this world. Jay-Z is a god. Beyonce has a cult. Many gods and idols in this world. Some believe some in heaven, and there's some on earth that people worship hardcore and will kill your ass behind. But to us, the believers of Yahweh Bashim Yahshua, there is but one God, all right, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord, Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, by whom are all things, and we by him. This is what we believe. Howbeit, there is not in every man that knowledge. For some with conscience unto the idol, of the idol unto this very hour, eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. See, in this instance, it goes back to what we just showed you. We showed you earlier that a lot of these Gentiles had come out of these idolatrous practices, but they were washed through Yahweh Shai. All right, so that meat being tied to those idols, they were like, hell nah, I ain't touching that. Yahweh Shai go kill me. You know, I'm scared. Because it had power over them. For someone who's stronger in the faith, those things don't have power over them. It's just a day. It's just meat. Right? NLT this thing. And we'll close it out in a minute. Oh boy, here we go. The Texas receptors. The received text. Interesting. Give me a second here. However, not all believers know this. Some are accustomed to thinking idols as being real. So when they eat food that has been offered to idols, they think of it as worshiping of real gods, and their weak conscience is violated. All right? But meat commendeth us not to the Most High. For neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. Okay? It is true that we cannot win God approval by what we eat. This is just meat. We don't lose anything if we don't eat it, and we don't gain anything if we do. All right? But take heed, all right, by any means, that this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to them that are weak. That's why he gave the example 2 chapters later. Look, keep certain things between you and Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. Just don't be wicked. All right? For if a man see thee which has knowledge, all right, and you're wise enough and you're not moved by these guys, sit at meat in the idol's temple. Again, certain restaurants are temples. Back then, it was the same thing. Didn't we read that? Somewhere in here. Let's see here. Yep. Pagan temples also served as restaurant and butcher shops. It's the same thing today. But see, Jake ain't saying you wicked for eating at an Elamite restaurant. They just want to bring attention to this topic to make themselves look good and condemn us. But back then, let's say you're eating at an Elamite restaurant. Somebody, all right, who just came out of those lifestyles and those guys would be like, wait a minute, you're eating those things which are offered to idols. And through your knowledge shall the weak brother perish of whom Yahushua died? But ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, and ye sin against Yahushua. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the Lord standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. So that was the breakdown. All right. If it's gonna offend my brother, I'm not gonna do it. So again, that's why it's best to just keep certain things to yourself. All right. And then in this chapter, he goes into his use of liberty. I'm gonna have to read that in my own time. All right. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. All right. The point was made. And again, this is a very, very good article to go into. It's off a Bible topic exposition. I'll try to remember to leave it into the description box. Hopefully you brothers and sisters were comforted by this lesson, and we can move on from this, stupid back and forth. But at the same time, it's bringing edification. So, hey, at the end of the day, it's the will of the Lord. Giving all praises to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rachakodash, double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone. Peace and salutations to the elect. Shalom.